I'm very glad to be here this afternoon because it represents the coming together of two very important bits of my life. For over 30 years, I worked for the health service in adult mental health as a clinical psychologist. And for more recently, for more than 10 years, I've been a GIST patient. In fact, I can go one better than Nick. I'm 12 years down the line. So not that we're playing survival one-upmanship, but just thought you'd like to know. So today I'm bringing together two bits. I'm the psychologist looking in, and I'm the patient looking out of this condition that has affected everybody in this room one way or another. And just as was said this morning, the things that I have to say this afternoon don't just apply to the patient, but also to their carers, their family, their friends, because cancer affects the whole family. It doesn't just affect the patient. And Nick was saying very eloquently that actually sometimes it's easier to be the patient than it is to be the carer who can do nothing but watch and often suffer too. So the first thing I want to get across is you. You are the expert on you. Nobody knows more about you than you do. And your journey through GIST involves you coming together with your knowledge about yourself and the medical knowledge that surrounds you to come up with the best possible solution that's tailor-made to you both physically and psychologically. The next thing to be said is that whatever you have felt, either on diagnosis or later on down the line, is an entirely normal response to what is actually an abnormal situation. It's not every day that we're diagnosed with a life-threatening disorder. And so however you feel, however you have felt, is entirely appropriate. Not the other way around. You are not the abnormal one reacting to a normal situation. I'm going to start by starting at the beginning, a very good place to start, with coping with the diagnosis, then going on to the crisis of the illness itself, and going on to the ongoing challenges. It is probably true for many of you that actually the diagnosis of having a GIST, a cancer, left you shocked, stunned, bewildered, disbelieving. I can't believe this is happening to me. For some of you, it actually may have come as a bit of a relief. You may have been having symptoms, some particularly nasty ones, as we heard this morning. At last, I have an explanation for my symptoms. But either way, you end up with a lot of other unwanted feelings. Fear. What is going to happen to me? I remember very clearly when I was first diagnosed that I thought it was my death sentence. We were expecting our first grandchild. Our daughter-in-law was going to have a baby. And I really didn't think I was going to see her born, never mind grow up. She's nearly 12 now. So there was a great deal of fear, loss of the person I used to be. I was no longer going to be a healthy person. We aren't. We become a person who has cancer. And never again can we go back to being a person without cancer. It follows us around. It's on our notes. It's part of us. And in the early days, there may be a feeling of great helplessness. There's nothing I can do. I am a victim of this. We talk more about being survivors, but you may feel a bit of a victim. And despair. Despair for now. What's going to happen? Despair for the future. Will I have a future? And many of us will find that you retreat. You go back home and close the doors just to take stock for a while before you start to get yourself back together again to face what is to come. The crisis brings all sorts of changes in your identity, the loss of your old self, the role that you have. You may be the breadwinner, you may be the main parent, the one who picks up from school, you may be the lead grandparent in childcare. And that may change. You may have concerns that you won't be able to do these things anymore. There are changes in social support. You get to learn to relate to new people in your life, the doctors, the oncologists, the nurses, GIST Cancer UK. And instead, you may not find that you're able to do some of your old roles, and that may be very difficult for you. You become the supported one rather than the supporter. And that may not sit very easily with you. And then, of course, there are worries about the future. First of all, do I have a future? And then what's to become of me? What if I'm a breadwinner? Will I carry on being able to work? Will I be able to travel? Will I be able to get health insurance? Will I be able to be me again? When I was diagnosed, I phoned the helpline, and I spent the first 5 minutes crying down the phone to poor Sheena, who, bless her, just hung on in there and waited for me to stop and gather myself together and blurt out, "I've got gist," before she then was reassuring and helpful and kind and supportive and got me onto the support network, and there I have been ever since. Further down the road, we have to cope with the ongoing illness, weighing up the impact of the surgery upon us, being a patient, being in pain, having to deal with an anaesthetic and whatever fears that may bring, dealing with symptoms, and we've had, again, pain mentioned very much this morning of how uncomfortable it can all be and the treatment. Developing new relationships with the health professionals around us. And it's very important that we have people around us that we can trust. I've taken 1 or 2 phone calls recently from people who are not happy with the care that they're getting, that the oncologist looking after them is not an expert. The surgeon says, "Go away, I've done my job, you're fine." But they're not sure that they trust them. They don't know that they are fine at all. They need the help and the ongoing support of people who really know what they're talking about, the likes of you. We have to keep the balance of the old you and the old friendships and keep up with as many of those as we can. And our old hobbies, to shine a light of normality through what is actually quite an abnormal situation, certainly in the early days, and helping us to prepare for an uncertain future. There are as many ways of coping with a diagnosis and the ongoing illness of GIST as there are people in this room. Don't forget what I said at the beginning, that you're the expert on you, and what is right for you is right. But one of the many ways of coping is seeking information and support, as I've already said, from the people who really know what they're talking about. Learning new skills, living without a stomach, coping with dumping syndrome, managing anxiety or low mood, trying to plan things to bring pleasure into your life, to offset some of the other things. Statistics, only one. Up to 20% of people with cancer may have severe depression, grief, anxiety, anger, a feeling of lack of self-control, or even a change in their personality. What that statistic hides is that many, many more have some or all of those symptoms in milder forms for some or even a lot of their time. Few of us have none of those symptoms at all during the course of our illness. Back to what I was saying, yours is a normal response to an abnormal situation. And indeed, your responses will vary, they won't stay the same. They go up and down as you go through different stages of your treatment. Often we see on the support network people referring to scanxiety, that awful feeling on your way to the hospital, not particularly to have the scan, but to get the results. Anxiety can go through the roof, and we can find us thinking all sorts of unhappy, negative thoughts like, this might be the last day I have being me. Tomorrow may bring something very new, very different, and very unwanted. And our fears can be quite enormous. Which takes us to the first clutch of clinical symptoms. I was going to say 3 sides of the same coin, but that would be silly because coins only have 2 sides. But they come as together: worry, fear, anxiety. They come as a trio. When we feel anxious, it affects us in 4 different ways. It affects us physically, We get a lot of unpleasant, unwanted symptoms. I had a few of them as I was standing there at 5 to 2 waiting to talk to you. It affects our thoughts, and we get a lot of worried, pessimistic, miserable thoughts. It may affect what we do or what we don't do. We end up avoiding certain situations that cause us particular discomfort. And anxiety affects our emotions. It brings us down. You don't meet happy, anxious people. Let's take each of those one by one. Can you read that at the back? Just. You'd like me to read through them, perhaps? I don't like talking about things that are up there, but I can do. There's a whole clutch of physical symptoms. You won't have all of them. You may not have any of them, in which case, good for you, that's great. But what you will have is your own pattern of responding that's pretty typical for you. Tiredness, aches and pains, irregular heartbeat or palpitations, trembling and shaking, dry mouth, sweating, shortness of breath, stomachache, feeling sick, headache, pins and needles, difficulty falling or staying asleep. It's an unholy alliance of different symptoms. And they can make you feel quite rotten. And this is on top, of course, of whatever symptoms you have with the physical gist itself. You may also find that you have a lot of unhelpful negative thoughts, black and white thinking. I'm not going to get better. It's hopeless. I'm stuck like this forever. You may find that you're jumping to arbitrary conclusions with nothing to support them, no real evidence. One of the common ones is you get a twinge, you think, oh, it's the gist, come back. The third one is changes in our behaviour, doing things differently, avoiding certain situations. You may avoid certain foods that disagree with you. We've heard about a little bit about this morning. You may avoid doing certain things, certain exercises that you did, you may not do anymore. You may find yourself doing things slightly different, that you wear the lucky earrings or the lucky underpants on your way to get the result from your scan. I'm wearing the lucky earrings today. You do it just in case. Superstitious? Well, perhaps. Does it hurt? No. Does it help? If it does, that's just fine. Going on then to the other side of it, the mood, the sadness, the low mood, the depression that sometimes comes with a diagnosis. And again, we have a whole range of symptoms. The psychological symptoms, I'll read them out for the people at the back. Low mood or sadness, feeling negative, pessimistic, fragile, feeling guilty perhaps about the changes that have had to come in family life as a result of what's happening. Perhaps feeling irritable and intolerant of other people, anxious or worried, feeling of real loss that you're not the person you used to be, you're not motivated or interested in the same things, you're finding it difficult to make decisions, and not getting any enjoyment out of life. And for many of us, one of the most difficult things to do is to learn to live with that uncertainty, to find ways of coping day by day without the niggling of what's going to happen. I always think a gist is a bit like either a little black cloud that sits on our shoulder and sometimes comes to the front and just clouds everything. At other times, it disappears somewhere around the back, almost out of sight. But it comes and it goes and it affects us as it does so. So how to cope? Well, one of the things, particularly if you're having severe anxiety or depression that's getting in the way of you living your life, is to perhaps to go and have a word with your own GP and not to be frightened to ask for some sort of medication to help you through. Let's face it, if you've got diarrhoea, you wouldn't hesitate to take loperamide to cope with the symptoms. And so it is with your mood. There are many medications out there. They're not addictive. They can help. They can be a real lifeline and help you get through and find other ways of dealing it so when eventually you feel able to get rid of that anti-anxiety or antidepressive and cope more on your own. Remember, you're the expert. What has worked for you in the past? Because I can't believe that for any of you, This is the first time you've ever been in a situation when you've been tried and tested to the limit. What worked for you before when you hit a crisis, a bereavement, a failed exam, a relationship breakdown? I'm sure you've all been there somewhere in your lives, and you found a way through it. And what worked for you then may well work for you now. What works for you? When we talk about relaxation, it's not just floppy ragdoll stuff. It's nice to think that it is, but that's only part of it. Many people say, oh, I relax watching telly. Now, it's very difficult. I would challenge that, and I often did, because you can sit and watch television, and your eyes may be on the box, but your thoughts may be somewhere quite different, thinking of something else entirely. Of course, there are some television programmes that work perfectly. Gardener's World is one, and I can recommend it. But you need to work out what works for you, what televisions work, and actually what don't. And it may be the same for music or anything else. For some of us, it's a long soak in a hot bath with the candles and perhaps a glass of something interesting, or a cup of something interesting. Time in the garden, time in the fresh air. The medical profession has just discovered that fresh air and exercise is good for us, something that we've all known for a very, very long time, but they're all cottoning on, and it's true. You can lose yourself in many different ways. Countryside walk, sometimes with yourself, sometimes with family or friends. The seaside. When I was working as a psychologist, I did a lot of relaxation work with people who were wound up for a variety of reasons. And one of the things that worked almost without fail was listening to a recording of the sound of the sea. We'd turn it on and people would go, ah, and you could see the relaxation and the relief that came. And of course now there are apps that you can get on your phone of all sorts of sounds that can be very restful and peaceful for you. Everything from birdsong to waterfalls to the sea, whatever works. Walking the dog, or dogs, so many. Or stroking the cat. Again, there's a realisation that animals are good for us, that they're there, they're friends and confidants, when sometimes other people, we don't like to burden them, but we can tell the dog or the cat anything and know that it won't tell anybody else. Yes, well, not too much, but sometimes it's quite nice, isn't it? It takes courage to face the worries, to ask for help, to ask for advice with the practical problems, the financial advice from perhaps Citizens Advice or a financial advisor, for those of you who are concerned about those things. To ask for help with daily chores or getting Tesco delivery to bring the groceries. To find ways of challenging the runaway thoughts that beset us at 3 a.m, when the rest of the world is asleep and we're there on our own, thinking the worst. And we have to challenge those things, as I've said, with things that we know to be true. It's no good saying to somebody, think positive, if in their heart they don't believe it. But you can tell them all sorts of other things that, as we've learnt today, there are many, many ways of treating gist. You're very far from the end of the road yet. There are many drugs there. Can't hear? Okay. There are many drugs that work, and we've heard today 3 more that are coming online that are in the process of clinical trial. The game is far from over. And then there are positive outcomes to having this awful diagnosis. You may find that you count your blessings. You see your children, your parents, your friends, your family, the grandchildren in a new and very welcome light. We count our blessings many times over and be grateful for what we have. An appreciation and a gratitude for the small things, a bit of sunshine, which indeed is welcome today, particularly after what we've had recently. A warm bed, the daffodils coming out, the snowdrops, the promise perhaps of a holiday, but not to northern Italy if you've got any sense. Or China, indeed. We get a different perspective on life. Different things are important to us now. And only you will know what has changed within your head. But for many of us, it's a change in our attitude to the world and the way we live our life. Again, as we heard this morning, seize the moment. Carpe diem. But perhaps, most of all, always remember and look around you. You're not alone. There are people around you who have trodden and are treading the same path as you. You're not on your own, even at 3 a.m. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much. I don't know if it's just me, but Marion, you have a voice that soothes. Is it just me, or you see what I mean? Just have that voice that soothes. It's lovely. Right, I'm sure we have some questions.
Anything too personal I won't answer, but anything else I will.
Every time at the back of the room.
It's a bit of an observation, but I had an interesting reaction lying in my hospital bed. I found myself protecting knowledge from my mother, my elderly mother, my son, and to some extent to all my siblings. And what I didn't realise was that in doing that, I was building up pressure in myself and frightening myself, really, in a way, and it sort of exploded in different ways. But it's an interesting thing about protecting those around you from that awful knowledge. That's all I wanted to say.
And that was you being mum or daughter, wasn't it, instead of patient, and they were winning over patient and patient need, which was actually perhaps to share. But it's very difficult to find the words in your hospital bed, isn't it?
Great talk, by the way. Thank you. I've got my own business. I'm a newbie to this, so I only had my surgery 10 months ago. I'm okay. But I've just lost a lot of sort of motivation and drive in my business. And I just sort of, I'm struggling to get my mojo back. I don't know if this is a common occurrence and what you'd suggest. You know, there's things that I need to do, and I just need a really big kick up the backside to get going again. So any help would be appreciated.
Oh, metaphorically speaking, sorry. Marion,
That is very difficult to answer.
Gentleman here wants to have a go at answering that first, if that's okay.
Excellent.
Just want to say you're not by yourself. Can you hear that? No. Just want to say that you're not by yourself. I had the same problem. But given time and good thinking, you'll get over it. And be positive.
I think there are no quick fixes to our reactions to the diagnosis of GIST. The only advice I would ever give you is to be gentle with yourself. So hold on to that kick up the backside. Be kind. And it's very difficult when you're trying to earn a living and you haven't got the energy or the motivation perhaps to get out there and do what you used to do. But you can't magic it out of nowhere. And it may be trying to let the dust settle. With bereavement, when we've lost somebody dear to us, we have to see the seasons round at least once before we can contemplate any sort of normality. And for many people, we have to see the seasons round a lot more than that. And so it is with this, because you truly have lost something. Be kind.
I can add a perspective to that. When I was diagnosed, I was running my own business with 10 employees. very hands-on as well. And we just finished a project probably 6 months after I had my operation, and I hadn't been to site for 5 months, and when I did eventually go to site, my father helped me climb up a ladder to get onto the scaffolding, just to sort of wander around and see what they were doing. We finished that project, and because I hadn't been able to get another project on the go, I had to make them all redundant, which cost me a lot of money. Like I said, 6 months after that, my wife then had breast cancer. She had to stop working as well, or it resulted in her stopping working. So, you know, motivation for me was equally as you describe. But as Marion has just said, there's no sort of formula for it other than your own mind. It's a case of you going to bed tonight after this meeting, thinking about what's been said, and telling yourself, when I wake up in the morning, I'm going to take the bull by the horns, have a positive mental attitude, and get on with it. Because you've still got a business, presumably. Yeah. So you're actually probably in a better position than I found myself in. But nevertheless, I just said to myself, it's no good me being negative about this. I've just got to be positive about this. So actually, I did what I've just described, and I found myself being lazy, almost. So I then bought myself a little project that I did on my own. And I got up in the morning at 8 o'clock, I went to this house that I ripped out completely, and just spent every day on my own doing it, and I loved it. And it gave me a purpose to get up in the morning, and it gave me an interest. I enjoyed it. I finished it. I then couldn't wait to do the next one, and things are back to normal now.
I used to cry. I run a business as well, and I've always been I used to cry because I used to have staff sitting on the table. Can you hear me? Yeah. I used to have staff sitting on the table, and my head wouldn't think. And I think I'm just a zombie, and I think, what the hell is it worth living? You know. But then you look for alternative, you know, like some like energy, you know, like some boost. So basically, you try food, you try exercise. That's the way. You know, what I do in the morning sounds a bit stupid, but I do sit-ups in the morning, press-ups in the morning, get the blood to the head, and then obviously it helps. But have a cup of tea in the morning just to get. But it is terrible. You feel like killing yourself. You feel like, you know, like this person is so active. All of a sudden you're a zombie. You know, and you know, all your life you set a goal and you do it. But now your goal is to survive. So your business comes a second. But at the same time, you want to be that same person. But you just got to try and error. But I'm still learning.
The grief from having jest is unique to you. My husband had jest, and it is highly, the grade on it is highly returnable. A week after my husband had his surgery, I found my 34-year-old son dead on the floor. No heart attack, his heart just stopped. He had cardiomyopathy. And 7 days later, his sister, who we rang to help him, had a massive stroke in our front room. So I think, count your blessings, because we still do with all that we've had.
Yeah, I think what that's emphasised is, you know, everybody's journey is different, and as much as psychologists are extremely important in that, in the role of helping you to focus on the things that will help you, ultimately, it's you that's got to do it. And I have ringing in my head a lot, PMA, positive mental attitude. And I keep telling myself that all the time, positive mental attitude, positive mental attitude. And it doesn't just help with the gist, it helps with all the other problems that you have in the world that you can change with a positive mental attitude. I know it's easier said than done, but it's a road to start on.
I'm sorry, I'm a bit hoarse. One of the side effects of regorafenib, unfortunately. One thing that I've noticed is that it's very important not to let GIST or cancer as a whole define you. I actually almost forget that I've got it, apart from that time, those few minutes every day when I take the tablets. And every time I go for my scan, then obviously I remember, but the rest of the time I just live my life. I've actually had Carpe Diem tattooed on my wrist, so I don't forget to live every day.
Yeah.
And I wake up every morning and I'm grateful to wake up. Thank you. And I just think, you know, to me, you're relatively new in your journey. I'm 7.5 years in, having been given 4 months to live when I was first diagnosed. So I think time does change your outlook, and GIST, you know, that you know, I'm living my life. It's just one of those things. So just enjoy your life, carpe diem, and carpe the out of that diem.
I also think to myself, when I'm feeling a bit low, there's always somebody worse off than you. And when you contemplate that, you think, and they're coping with it and dealing with it, so Christ, I ought to be able to. It's just another thought to run around in the head.
Mind you, sometimes knowing that somebody's worse than you doesn't make you better. It doesn't take away your situation. As I've said all along, be gentle with yourself. And there's something that appears on Facebook from time to time, and it's a rhyme, and I can only remember the first 2 lines. If you can't climb a mountain, climb a hill instead. Sorry, there's some...
I just want to encourage us to not share your secrets with everybody, because the last thing you want is people to feel sorry for you. And the next thing, I do prison ministries on a Friday. I go into ISIS prison and run rings with the guys, and it makes me feel worthwhile, you know, doing something that is good. My daughter Natalie, she takes me to massages and take me out of London, you know, and that helps my self-esteem. So, and I will encourage you again, don't share your sickness with everybody, because the last thing you want to do is for people to feel sorry for you.
Oh yes, I thought you might have to say something.
Marion, I was particularly interested in your list of physical symptoms arising from the mental issues.
Yes.
Because so many of them are, in fact, the items regularly listed as side effects of medication.
Mm.
So I think I've been looking quite a lot at side effects and management of side effects in the literature. And I would just say to people worried about side effects, understand that maybe they are mental side effects and not medication side effects. So look after the mental health as long as the simple physical things.
Marion, is there anything else you'd like to add?
The expertise is in the room.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just wanted to say to you that, you know, you've had a life-changing event relatively recently, and I think it's inevitable that your values will change, your priorities will too, and so, I mean, I don't know your personal business circumstances, but maybe it's actually not so important.
Well, we're spot on time. Look. Anybody else like to ask or make any comment? It doesn't have to be questions, it can be comments to help. Yeah.
This is a bit like a confession, but I've never said this to people before, but I think I will. So I was diagnosed with GIST 5 years ago, and I've obviously what you've been talking about how people feel mentally, it's true. Now I've got an office and it is full of paperwork that I haven't I've put stuff in there and I haven't filed it, I haven't done anything with it, and it's got really, really untidy. And my husband says something, and my son-in-law says something, but what's really good is what you've all said, is that I only started to realise the other day that really it's been in a mess for 5 years since I was first diagnosed. And a few days ago, I thought, I've got to come to terms with that, I've got to come to terms with that. So everything you've said so far has actually been very helpful to me to realise that, you know, it's, I've got to do the PMA, yeah, that's right. But it's nice to know there are other people with similar problems and worse problems. I mean, if you've got your own business and you have to cope with having a gift as well, it must be dreadful. So just want to say thank you.